Hello, my name's Jambre. Welcome back to Analyse the Pros. Today we have a game between Fibonacci and KillinAllDay taking place in the HCT Summer Play-offs. The score in the series is 2-all, and this is the final game they're going to play. The winner goes on to qualify for the seasonal championships, and the loser goes home probably feeling pretty sorry for themselves. Deck lists are known for both players, so we should study them as well. For Fibonacci as the warrior, he's kind of known for innovating a lot of warrior decks on ladder, and this one seems to be no different. We're looking at a big style recruit warrior. Noticeable weaknesses of this deck is that the early game is kind of lacking. You don't really spend much of the early turns really affecting the board too much. You're usually like either drawing cards or armoring up, trying to set up those board clears later on. And then in the late game, you're just dropping bomb after bomb after bomb. If we look at the Druid, it's running a Spiteful Druid. A lot of variations between decks on these ones, but for this one, it's specifically teched for slower matchups, it looks like. It's only running one Mind Control tech. It's running 2 extra 5-drops in the form of a bit of Tidehider and a Druid of the Claw. As we go through the games, we'll kind of reference back to the deck list when it's relevant, so don't worry about taking too much note of this right now. Unfortunately, Fibonacci mulliganed so fast that we didn't get to see his options. All we know is that he kept a Brawl. I'm not huge on just keeping a Brawl on its own. I'd rather mulligan pretty aggressively for Blood Razor or for Forge of Souls, which will find you a Blood Razor for you. The reason being is like if you spend all your early turns just armoring up and passing, and then all you have in hand on turn 5 is a Brawl, you're going to have to use that Brawl to just basically answer the Druid's early game minions, which is something that you don't really want to spend a 5-mana card doing. I'd much rather aggressively mulligan for things like Blood Razor, and then maybe you pick up stuff like Warpath along the way, and that's going to allow you to deal with the Druid's boards a bit more proactively than just waiting and simply brawling away most of the board, but not all of it. For the Druid side, they actually have a very good opening hand, and it might not be for why you think. Vicious Fledgling is historically very strong against sort of slow decks, which don't have any minions in the early game. But I'd argue it's actually the weakest of the 4 cards in this mulligan. Because the warrior doesn't actually have any early game minions, or really any weapons before turn 4, you could actually structure your curve to go 1-drop on turn 1, 1-drop on turn 2, and then on turn 3 you play one of your 3-drops, and then you coin out the Fungal Monster, and you pretty much always will have 2 targets for that to land, and that's a very strong sort of opening curve for the Druid against this warrior. And if you're going for that strategy, the strongest thing that the warrior can do to kind of contest that is like maybe say a Blood Razor on turn 4, followed by another AoE on turn 5, and actually, to prevent that the most, you should actually play Druid of the Scythe in taunt form on turn 3, putting yourself with 4 health taunt in the way. That means Blood Razor's initial attack and battle cry only does 3 damage, and their second swing is forced to swing into a 2-1 taunt, which is something they don't really want to be doing. If you went 1-drop Fledgling into Fungal Monster, the Blood Razor would be immediately able to kill the Fledgling, and then the second swing of the Blood Razor is going to do even more damage to your board as they get to take advantage of the attack of the weapon and not just the whirlwind effect. KillinAllDay instead decides to throw away Fungalmancer and the Firefly and just keep both the 3-drops. I assume he's going for a strategy of going coin Fledgling into follow-up 3-drop. Throwing away the Firefly is complete bonkers in this situation. It's a 1-drop, you don't really have many others other than Glacial Shard. Just playing this Firefly on 1 is going to be pushing 1 damage a turn for 3 to 4 turns at least. So if I was actually doing this mulligan, I think the correct thing to do, which is probably not the most obvious thing, is to go Firefly, Scythe and Fungal Monster and throw away the Fledgling. If you're going 1-drop, 1-drop, 3-drop coin 5, you really want your turn 5 play to be like another 5-drop like a Hydra or a Druid of the Claw, which we both run, or you want to be looking for things like Spiteful Summoner, because that's going to be a very powerful tool. There's not going to be many turns that we can actually play this Vicious Fledgling on, even though it's historically kind of strong against these slower decks. It's Druid's turn 1 and Killin coins out the Keleseth. I can't believe it's 2018 and people are still doing this strategy. All you get from this is an extra buff on your next minion. It's definitely not worth using the coin to do so when you already have a 1-drop available. It's much stronger to go for a line of, say, 1-drop, then Keleseth, then 3-drop, and then saving your coin for your power plays, like your Spitefalls, like your other 5-drops. Just using the coin to get an extra buff on one minion over waiting a turn to play it is absolutely not worth it in my book. I'd rather keep my turns flexible, and I'd rather be able to move to my power plays more readily. If you coin Keleseth now, you're kind of forced to go double Firefly on 2, and then a 3-drop on 3, and then if you haven't drawn well, you're going to be playing another one of these 3-drops on turn 4, and you're going to be floating a mana to do so. Instead, if you just go Firefly on 1, Prince Curse on 2, 3-drop on 3, and then you have the coin available to either, you can just play your turn 4 as like a 3-drop and your 1, and you have the coin for a 6, for example, or you could just coin out a 5 if you get it by your turn 4. By coining out Keleseth here, you're kind of forcing yourself into playing these non-Keleseth buffed minions because your turns are so less flexible. And what that means is, when it comes to the warriors turns 4/5, they're going to have a much easier job of cleaning up your board with their various AoEs. You're not going to have enough health on the board to stop yourself suffering from things like Blood Razor and Warpath. So even though you get more buffs, it actually kind of takes you longer to make use of those buffs because you've limited your turns by using the coin so early. The Druid's turn 3 is an interesting one. They have 3 viable choices in the Crypt Lord, the Fledgling, or the Druid of the Scythe. When we go into the turn, we've got to kind of talk about reads, really. We know that the warrior has kept 1 card and they haven't played it up until their turn 4. So for likely candidates, it's either going to be Blood Razor, which is something they would definitely keep 100% of the time, or it could be something like Brawl, which Fibonacci might just be keeping in this matchup. Against both those cards, Fledgling's not actually that good. Against the Blood Razor, it initially just dies straight away to the Blood Razor weapon, and then you're left with a board which might be cleaned up next turn. Against a Brawl, yeah, you get 1 adapt off if the warrior doesn't have a turn 4 play, but how useful is that adapt against a Brawl anyway? If you do get Brawled on turn 5, the only adapt that actually does anything against that is the Death Rattle adapt. And in my mind, exposing yourself to a Blood Razor on this turn when you have kind of no idea whether the opponent does have one, and it's very likely they keep it in the Mulligan, I don't think it's worth doing that. Instead, I'd probably play a Druid of the Scythe in Taunt form here. Okay, it's your turn 4 and the warrior has kept a card and not played any cards at all up until now. You have to expect that that card is some sort of board clear, probably a Brawl. It could be something, he could have some sort of combo like Ironhide, Reckless Flurry as well, which deals with the board quite nicely. So should you play a minion here, and if so, which one should you play? I think the answer to that is you should play a minion here. If you just pass and say like Hero Power the Face, you give the option of the you give the option of the warrior to be quite greedy and not use their board clear and take an extra round of face damage and then Brawl on the next turn. This kind of like ramps them closer to their power plays in their 8-drops, etc. So I'd definitely play a minion here to kind of punish that sort of strategy. In terms of what one I'd play, I think it's a very, very obvious greedy sprite here. The reason being is if it dies during the Brawl, you just get a little bit of something back for next turn being the mana ramp, and you can do your next turn for 6 mana and play just 2 3-drops. Playing the Druid of the Scythe here doesn't make much sense. That minion's always going to be able to be a 4-2, and you have a 4-2 in hand with a beneficial Death Rattle, and you're expecting your board to be wiped. Why would you not play the beneficial Death Rattle over the flexible card? Things like Warpath here aren't going to be able to clean up your board very well. They'll only do a little bit of damage to it. You're just really kind of expecting a Brawl on the next turn, and the best thing to do against that is play Greedy Sprite. For the Warriors turn 5, there's definitely a consideration to not brawling this board. The brawl kind of effectively deals with pretty much all of it, and they'll be left with kind of a smallish minion. So anything that the Druid adds to the board next turn is kind of just going to die anyway to this brawl. So you're effectively kind of ramping yourself a mana crystal if you don't brawl here, but you end up taking a lot of face damage in doing so. I think the Druid's damage on board is a little bit too high for you to be greedy here. If they had like maybe 4 less damage on this board, I would definitely be a bit greedy here and not use it to brawl and kind of wait a turn. That way you get a bit of a smoother transition into your turn 8 plays, and you also get to deal with anything extra the Druid's playing on their turn 5. The Druid's turn 5, they're kind of suffering from the fact that they didn't play Greedy Sprite last turn. Having 6 mana here would be so much better, allowing you to play something like Crypt Lord and a 3-drop, or just 2 other higher attack 3-drops. Now you're kind of forced into playing a 3-drop and the Fireflies, or a 3-drop and Hero Power, both of which are kind of low pressure plays. You kind of want to be ramping towards your UI, so it does make quite a bit of sense to maybe play the Greedy Sprite here. One of the problems in playing the Greedy Sprite is that you open yourself up to a Warpath, whereas a Crypt Lord's a little bit better against that. Although you only retain 1 attack on board against a Warpath anyway with a Crypt Lord. So even in that case, maybe it's just best to go for the Greedy Sprite here and try and get your ramp going, as well as just adding more attack power onto the board. For Druid's 7 mana turn, it's pretty clear that next turn's booked up with a Grand Archivist, so you're pretty much always going to be playing that. So the question is what to do this turn. In my opinion, it's a very clear play of Crypt Lord, Ooze and Firefly. A lot of people tend to hold on to the Ooze, and it looks like KillinAllDay is another one prone to doing this. If you think about your next few turns, you're not going to have much time to play this Ooze. Your board immediately on the next turn is not going to be weak to a Blood Razor anyway. You're going to have a 4/4, a huge 1/6 taunt that grows, and a 1/2 minion. So none of that is weak to an initial Blood Razor. So there's much better things that the warrior is going to be wanting to do. So actually holding an Ooze in hand to try and counter a play that's not even good doesn't seem like a great strategy. Additionally, once you've played your Grand Archivist next turn, you're going to be drawing a whole bunch of buffed minions from your deck, so you're not going to be having much time to play the Ooze. Your board's going to be so heavy and so big that if you're worried about something like a Woe Cleaver on turn 8, well, the warrior's not going to have a great time of being able to play it because they're going to be taking too much damage from your board anyway. So playing something like a turn 8 Woe Cleaver shouldn't be that much of an issue for you. For warriors turn 7, it's pretty easy gather your party. There's not much threat on the board right now, so you can take a bit of extra face damage this turn. Let's just get a big body onto the board and start trying to contest this board. For Druid's turn 8, there's the possibility of playing the Lich King and getting a Lich King card. The 9/9 body contests this rot face quite well. One of the problems is it's very, very weak to executes. If something were to come down like Blood Razor execute, then you'd be in a lot of trouble. The warriors' past few turns have all been very strong since that brawl turn on turn 5, so it's very possible that they have any of those cards in hand. Also things like Bring It On, Shield Slam become a problem if you leave this rot face on the board. You start kind of losing control of the board. The Grand Archivist puts out 2 bodies onto the board. You're less weak to execute, that sort of thing, and you also draw a ton of cards from your deck, giving yourself potential good turn 9 plays as well. For the warriors turn 8, they go for an immediate attack into the Crypt Lord, I guess trying to see what comes out of the rot face and then decide from the rest of the turn. I think this is a really big mistake. This kind of like closes off the option of going for a Reckless Flurry this turn, because you completely kill off the rot face and damage the minion that comes out of the rot face. If you're going for a Reckless Flurry this turn, the best sequence to do it is to Reckless Flurry first. That way you get an undamaged legendary minion out of your rot face, and you're left with a 4/1 rot face facing down just a Crypt Lord, and you get that extra legendary minion on the board as well. I don't really like playing the Lich King this turn. You're on 12 health. Your opponent's got more than 12 attack on board, it means you just immediately die to a Spellbreaker. Your opponent's literally just drawn 5 or 6 cards from their previous turn, and it's very possible that they have one in hand given that they run 2. And even if they don't have one, well, the Lich King kind of just trades poorly into this 12 attack board anyway, as you only have 8 health worth of taunt on the board. So I think for this turn, you're probably wanting to go for the Reckless Flurry. You can start with a Shield Block, Reckless Flurry. You clear off all the big attack things and just leave them with a Crypt Lord. You get a legendary minion out of it, and it means your turn 9 is looking like something like 8 drop plus Ironhide. You could even go for Yip in that case, because if you still get the armor from this turn, you're going to have a 7 mana minion come out of that Yip. So for this turn, I think you probably want to be starting with the Shield Block and going with the intention of using that Flurry and getting that legendary minion and clearing off most of the board. You're probably going to be going for an armor up after that. Leave yourself with 2 armor and 12 health against a 1 attack minion. And then it means that your turn 8 can be something like Yip plus Ironhide to get yourself out a minion onto the board. Or if you need something more defensive, just go for the Lich King plus Ironhide, and then go for maybe Yip, bring it on turn 10. The problem with going with the strategy of bring it on Reckless Flurry, say, oh, I want to save this till the Druid commits all of their minions onto the board, and then just blow it all away. Well, the problem with that, it costs 5 mana. When you're running a deck with a lot of 8 drops and 9 drops, etc., you can't clear the board and develop something on your own. And when the Druid's already UI'd you and they have a Keleseth buff deck, it's not possible to kind of run them out of resources by just removal alone. You need to be setting up your swing turn now while it's good, and then just piling onto the board with stats afterwards. And that's how you play this matchup, that's how you get onto the board, that's how you win. For Druid's 9 mana play, you're looking down at 2 Rot Faces and a Whirlwind effect ready to go. It's pretty clear if you leave this without doing anything about it, you're going to very quickly fall behind on board into an inescapable loss in that sense. There is some arguments that you can just push the face damage and then try and burn out the warrior and just kind of ignore the board from this point. But because the warrior has so many sort of armor gain effects with like Bring It Ons, Ironhides, Shield Blocks, etc., this strategy doesn't seem very viable. So in terms of dealing with this board right now, I think the most efficient way to do it is to trade your 5/2 into their 4/4. That way they don't get the effect of the Rot Face, and then just simply using a Spellbreaker on the other one, and then you can Fungomancer your board and push face damage. KillinAllDay play, he sequenced it very badly. He actually kills off one of his minions for no reason. He could have just traded the 5/2 into the 4/4, buffed the 5/4 Ghoul and value traded into the Rot Face, but instead he chose to buff the 5/2 with the Fungomancer, so he kind of just killed his own minion for no real benefit there. I don't really like just killing both of them as your play. I think I'd rather go for silencing one of them and just pushing face damage. You leave yourself with quite a strong board, and you get rid of all of the warrior's armor, so you kind of make it a lot harder for them to do tempo plays like Shield Slams or Reckless Flurries for the next turn, as well as getting closer to that win condition of just killing them. You could either Fungomancer the Fireflies to get them out of the range of the Bloodrazor Death Rattle, or you could Fungomancer the 5/4 and the 1/1 and make your board less weak to something like a Warpath, although you have already seen one of them. There's a few decisions you can do here. Fibonacci chooses to go for the Shield Slam and Lich King on this turn. I don't think this is that strong of a play. For one reason, it's incredibly weak to a silence effect. You might have a read they don't have one because they didn't use it last turn, although they also did make a fluff up of last turn. Even if they don't have a silence, it doesn't take much for them to be able to deal with this Lich King. They can literally just trade their entire board away and then repopulate their board with extra minions, and then you're kind of left in a spot where you kind of have to either Reckless Flurry or go for a Bring It On or something. So even when they don't have the huge punish of a Spellbreaker, bear in mind they've run 2 Spellbreakers in the deck, the reward isn't all that great. If you do get Spellbreakered, you kind of pretty much lose the game. You take too much face damage, you end up having to Reckless Flurry the turn after, and you don't get to put anything else onto the board at that point. So in my opinion, I think the best thing to do this turn is to actually use the Reckless Flurry and just trade your trade your 5-drop into their Crypt Lord, completely clearing their board, and you get an armor up out of it. I don't think you want to use a Bring It On because it's just going to let the Druid repopulate the board a lot more faster. You should be fine for your health total over the next 2 turns. Your turn 10 can be something like Yip plus Bring It On, which is going to gain you a lot of board presence and a lot of armor. It's really hard for the Druid to set up any lethal damage on the next turn. You're going to have 15 health after this turn from the armor up, and then next turn you're going to have another 10, so you'll be on 25. So it's really hard for them to set up a 2-turn lethal after clearing up this board. And then you're going to have a Yip and a 10-drop on board, which is going to really help you contest the board going forward. From that point, if the Druid decides to ignore your board, maybe Spellbreaker your Yip, push face damage, you're going to have another Bring It On in hand, you're going to have a Shield Slam in hand, so it's going to allow you to sort of swing the tempo back while having a lot of stats onto the board. So I think this is a really good opportunity, again, to use the Reckless Flurry to kind of just deal with this board. You're going to have the Blood Razor still equipped in hand to maybe potentially deal with some of the opponent's next board while you go for your Geosculptor Yip. For this turn, Spellbreaking the Lich King seems like a very good strategy here. You have another Spellbreaker in hand if you need it down the line, although there isn't really too much left that you want to use it on. For the rest of your turn, you have 6 mana available. Probably want to go for something big here. You don't want to be playing another 4 health minion. The reason being is that if the opponent did get the 3 damage AoE from their Lich King card, that with the Death Rattle from the Blood Razor would completely clear your board, and you'd be completely behind on board and be kind of relying on face damage. So I think here you want to be kind of playing around that a little bit by playing the Hydra. That way at least it can contest the Lich King on board if you need to start playing for board again. For the Warrior's turn, you kind of have to Bring It On, flurry this board. There's far too much damage, and we can kind of see that it's not a very good one because you end up killing your own board as well and not developing anything of your own, and you're still kind of on a low health total. And that's the punish from playing the Lich King last turn, was the Spellbreaker, which we kind of have to expect at this point. We've seen so many of the Druid's deck already, and they do run 2 of them. Now we just kind of want to put as much stats onto the board as we can to try and set up that lethal. So I kind of like the Ooze to get rid of the weapon, kind of prevent them from using things like Execute next turn. Getting the Lich King down is pretty nice, and then just charging the face of the Druid of Claw puts the most pressure on, allowing you to get that damage in now, so you can potentially use the UI next turn for 5 damage to the face. The game is pretty much over at this point. The warrior kind of has to just play the cards they can to survive, which is going to be Bring It On and the taunts. It doesn't look like it's going to be enough to actually swing back the game in their favour, and it's kind of a result of them being a bit too greedy with some of their AoE effects and a bit too slow with their strategy. For KillinAllDay now, Spellbreaker coming down on one of these taunts. There's no more taunts left in the warrior deck. It seems like Spellbreaker to push face damage, especially when it costs 0, is a given this turn. And then I'd probably just UI the face. You haven't got many cards left in your deck. This isn't going to go down to fatigue. You still have a Malfurion in your deck, and if you can draw that, that's going to be pushing a lot of face damage each turn, and you're very quickly going to be able to close out the game. Killin seems to just hero power the face this turn, which I don't particularly like. He also kills off his minion. I'm not sure if the warrior playing Brawl and winning the Brawl would be enough for them to even get back into this game at this point. But you're kind of giving them that hope by keeping your board size small and being really slow with your turns. Like, there's no reason not to UI the face this turn. I don't think having this Druid of the Claw on 1 health really matters that much. You could, if you don't want to push 1 face damage, instead you can just UI one of the taunts instead. As we kind of close out this game, I want to talk about you know, what you want to be doing with either deck. For a brainless deck like Spiteful Druid, KillinAllDay seemed to misplay almost every single turn. Don't know if that means he's got a negative brain or what. Who knows? But anyway, as a Druid side, you really want to be just planning out your mana curve effectively. Really thinking what can the opposing control deck really do on each of their turns and trying to play best around that. On the warrior side, we saw, well, let's first be saying this is not a great matchup for the warrior. Stats say so, that it's got like a 40-something% win rate overall. But when you're playing these matchups where you have a slim chance of winning, you should be just kind of going all in on the strategy of finding your highest win rate stuff at the start, things like Blood Razor and Forge of Souls, and not going for like the middle-ish strategy saying, oh, this is sometimes good, I might just keep this. Because sometimes good is not good enough in a matchup you're unfavoured in. You really need to be going for those sort of nuts special hands